the gods had been with men, that deities and divine powers walked the earth. Now, this again may be regarded as symbolical. Perhaps what they were trying to tell us is that in a remote time long ago, the human being was naturally mystical, naturally had the power of extrasensory perception, naturally could communicate or understand, estimate, or react to the divine principles upon which the universe was based. That the gods walking with men merely meant that the God power in man was not obscured as it is now. That gradually over a course of time, the material world has taken over. The ancient peoples had a very simple physical existence comparatively. There was no problem of population, no intensive competition in trade, and wars were comparatively limited to a few swashbuckling militarists. The people in general lived a very quiet and a natural life, completely dependent upon their insights into universal laws. Just as the American Indian, without any assistance from the outside, not only developed a profound mysticism, but evolved from within himself practically every law, rule, and principle necessary to the government of his affairs. The Great League of the Iroquois was probably one of the most important movements of international peace that the world ever knew. And yet it was developed and perfected by Indians sitting under trees, wrapped in skins of animals and with feathers in their hair. And yet these people, intuitively and internally, had a tremendous depth of insight. This depth of insight has been lost as the result of the individual being subjected to continual external conditioning. He is taught from childhood not to think for himself, not to search within himself for the answers to his problems, but to read them out of books and have them conferred upon him by physical educational processes. As a result of that, he has lost the power of direct contact with realities. His new philosophy, if you could call it such, is built entirely upon the opinions of his contemporaries and the interpretations by these contemporaries of earlier documents and beliefs. If we assume that the individual was a source of almost complete knowledge, that he had the skills and the abilities to intuit nearly everything necessary to his own survival, it is then quite probable that we are gradually going to learn that the leaders of this intuitive procedure were parts of a great sacerdotal group. You might be willing to call them the mysterious sages, the wise men of ancient times, the first ones of the earth who knew, and the giants of mind and thought who were upon the earth in those days. In any event, however, there was undoubtedly a tradition that descended into Egypt from a still earlier source, a tradition based upon an internal development of spiritual resources, a development which went back perhaps to India or to one of the ancient civilizations that have now vanished away. But by 4,000 or 5,000 or even 10,000 BC, there was a great knowledge in the hands or in the keeping of a few persons. And these few persons more or less set up the system of mysteries which operated in Egypt, Greece, and the Roman Empire. Now in this also, I think it is very important to bear in mind that the initiate system, which was the prevailing system in Egypt at that time, was based upon one tremendous point, a point which we have lost, a point which we have never really attempted to restore, but about which we have given considerable thought and consideration. The purposes of the mysteries, according to such initiates as Plotinus, Proclus, Iamblichus, Ammonius Saccas, and others, was very simple. that the individual should learn factually, truly, beyond question, beyond doubt, through personal experience, that death is an illusion. That immortality is the summit of man's problem. That the ancients not only believed in it, but kept this belief in secret, but developed a science by means of which they could communicate the fact and example and circumstance of death directly to another person.